What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the show. Welcome to Big Time Football Talk. So let's talk college football. And I'm thinking about Texas A&M, and I'm just thinking about how Jimbo Fisher's got to get it done this year. I mean, if there was ever a year, if there's ever a team, if there's ever a coach that's really got to get it done, it's Jimbo Fisher and A&M this year, man. Like 5-7 last year, that's just ridiculous. I mean, look at the talent they've recruited. Evan Stewart was a top receiver coming out of high school. They've done a good job of, the offensive line's still a little bit shaky, linebacker. If you look Jimbo Fisher, he's never really been great at recruiting offensive line, though, for some reason. You look at Florida State. They had, the year they won the national championship in 2013 when Fisher was here, they had a few NFL guys, but you look at now at A&M, it's kind of the same story. They had Kenyon Green. Was he even a Fisher recruit? Kenyon Green was a nice player who was drafted by the Houston Texans first round. But, other than him, it's just kind of plug-and-play guys, hustle guys, solid guys, but no NFL dudes, difference makers on the offensive line. They played multiple quarterbacks last year. They had some other speedsters, Anaya Smith, Chase Lane, Devon A-Chain. A-Chain, I called that last year. A-Chain was a real bright spot. Losing him will hurt because he's just a weapon as far as speed out the backfield. So losing A-Chain will hurt. But yeah, A&M still have plenty of talent, even though they've lost a lot of guys in the transfer portal. I think Jimbo Fisher still can coach. He's an offensive mind. He's known for being hard on his quarterbacks. Whoever's going to play quarterback, I still got to look. To be honest, I got to take a gander at the depth chart. I know that the Haynes King guy was decent. I think he was the one that started against Alabama. But yeah, A&M, I mean, to me, it's hard to put a number on how many wins they need because, 8 or 9, I say at least – I was thinking 8 or 9 wins, but 8 wins can mean a lot of different things. There's some years 8 wins means you're competitive in the conference. It means maybe you lost a couple late, maybe you lost a few key games. But 8 wins can also mean you were not competitive. You lost every game or you lost games early. You lost important games in early, middle of the season that eliminated you. For example, remember Florida in 2020? They went 8-4. Granted, that was a COVID year. But if you remember Florida, they were right in it. They just dropped some games late. Fell apart in the bowl game when they had 1 million opt-outs, and then they lost to Alabama in the SEC championship, finishing 8-4. But it was a very competitive 8-4, and it was an 8-4 where they were lost to Alabama from making the college football playoff that year, most likely. Anyways, so would have had 2 losses, and that probably was the true college football playoff game. And that goes to my other point with the transition to the Florida Gators. Now the Florida of this year, I mean, where is some of their NFL talent? That was kind of the case for why Anthony Richardson's play was so up and down. He was trying to do too much because they just don't have NFL dudes, NFL difference makers on the Florida roster. So yeah, I mean, you look a few years ago. I know Dan Mullen got fired, but look at all the guys they had. Kyle Trask was drafted. Despite what you think of him in the National Football League. I mean, Kyle Pitts, even though he's underwhelmed a bit, Kyle Pitts is an NFL tight end. Kadarius Toney, once again, another guy underwhelmed, but you get my point, though. They had NFL dudes. C.J. Henderson. So, yeah, Florida has always had NFL guys, with the exception of a little bit last year. So can Billy Napier... it looks like they had I forget what they were ranked recruiting-wise, but they had a pretty good class coming in this year. Can Florida kind of get back on track and can they be competitive next year? I guess you could say they were fairly competitive last year at 6 wins, but I don't know. That's kind of almost like an oxymoron. When is 6 wins really competitive? I guess they did beat most of the teams that were supposed to beat, but they also, had some poor showings and lost some games they shouldn't have. So how does Florida do next year? No Anthony Richardson. I know they got that one receiver returning, plays primarily in the slot. I forget exactly what his name, but he's a pretty good player. I know they got some talent in the secondary. Offensive line, they do lose Osiris Torrance. But their offensive line, it was okay. So be interesting to see how the Florida Gators do. So let's talk LSU some more. Why not? So this will be Brian Kelly's second year in LSU. LSU, big expectations are really ramping up. I listened to Brian Kelly on the Paul Feinbaum show, and he's aware of the expectations. I mean, he's not an idiot. He's been around the block. Central Michigan, Grand Valley, Cincinnati, Notre Dame. He knows the expectations that come as being a college football coach. And Brian Kelly, I think he is a guy who knows how to evaluate talent. He's had a proven track record of bringing in NFL talent. Not as much. He's needed more. I think LSU is a perfect fit because he's really been able to bring in some of the size and physical SEC caliber offensive linemen, which has been a difference maker in my opinion. But also, he's done he knows how to find NFL guys, especially when there was recruiting. There was recruiting limitations at Notre Dame. He did a good job of bringing in talent. I mean, you look at Kyle Rudolph, was an NFL guy. Who else did they have? I mean, Michael Floyd. You can go down the list. NFL. He was producing NFL talent at Notre Dame, and even Isaiah Foskey, that defensive end last year. There were some NFL dudes. Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith was a big land. I forgot how highly recruited Jalen Smith was. I mean, before that injury, you're talking about he might have been a top 3 pick. I mean, he was regarded as a generational type linebacker in Jalen Smith. And it's too bad he just had that horrible knee injury. I should say knee injury. It was like a leg injury in that Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State. That was really costly. But yeah, Notre Dame will be interesting. Year 2, Marcus Freeman. Technically, what would it be? It was kind of like year 3 because he took over at the end of the 2021 season. He's been there multiple years. Marcus Freeman, I think he's a good leader. I think he gets his guys to play for him. I think Notre Dame still has some talent on their roster. They lost their one quarterback. Is transferring to Alabama. So, yeah. Well, I mean, Notre Dame give some credit. They did get better as the season went on. Notre Dame got better as the season went on, so you give credit. Usually good teams get better as the season goes on. But yeah, Notre Dame should be good once again this year. I'm not ready to say they're going to be a college football playoff team, but will they be competitive? Absolutely. Do they still have some talented players? Absolutely. So I'm thinking of, some of the top players in college football. Man, I just want to talk Harold Perkins. I love watching Harold Perkins. The dude, he is one guy that you watch him and his just acceleration just like stands out. Like the dude just like can fly. You watch him chase down that Arkansas quarterback this past year. I mean, Harold Perkins, true game changer. And it's just like players like that are so important. It's kind of like Devin White when he was at LSU, just because like speed at linebacker and a guy that can just run sideline to sideline and track people down is so important, because you got to think that saves so much yardage throughout the course of a season. Like, that is the difference between a 8 to 10 yard gain it saves a potential 30, 40 yard gain, and he can turn it into 8 to 10 yard gain because he can run a guy down like that. I mean, Harold Perkins is just such a stud. Got to believe he's going to be right up there as far as, top guys in the 2025 NFL draft. So talking a couple years out, but that's what type of potential, this dude has. So, all right, so let's talk USC for a minute. USC enters into year 2 of Lincoln Riley. So Lincoln Riley in year 1 did a tremendous job, and this is what we thought. We thought USC was going to be really good, and shocker, they were really good. They are a team who, they lack the talent in the trenches. The offensive line, defensive line is going to certainly be a question for USC, but Lincoln Riley, they are going to put up some points. I think Mario Williams is not getting talked about as one of the best wide receivers. I think he's up there as one of the best wide receivers in college football. Mario Williams is a dude. I think he moves differently. By different, I mean like he moves like one of the best wide receivers, up there with Worthy, Harrison, Abuka. Some of the guys that are being discussed as some of the top wide receivers. But yeah, USC, they did some nice things in the transfer portal. So yeah, they're gonna be competitive. And the Pac-12, a lot of people think it's just gonna kind of cannibalize itself. A lot of teams are just gonna beat up on each other, which I could see happening. This kind of has the feel like USC is just gonna lose 2 games. Like they're probably gonna lose 1 game they're not supposed to, and then they'll probably lose to a team that's really good. Maybe they drop 1 to Washington, then maybe they lose. Maybe they lose to Oregon State this time, because last year it was a nail biter, tough, hard fought win on the road against Oregon State. So maybe they do drop 2 games to a team they're not supposed to. I say a team they're not supposed to, but Oregon State might be pretty good. They quietly have developed into a pretty good team. They do lose that Omar Spates, that linebacker, but DJ Uyunglele comes in, despite what you think about DJ Uyunglele, he's a guy that's had a lot of experience, a guy that knows has shown he's known how to come back and win some games, which I think is very important. And it just, I'll say, I guess you really can't put a price on experience, even if a guy's not that good. I know that you really want a difference maker, a guy with an NFL potential, like I go on and on about. But yeah, DJ Uiagalelei certainly has a skill set good enough to win some games for Oregon State. And Oregon State quietly produced some pretty good players the past couple of years. Look at the tight end that just got drafted this year, Musgrave, Jamar Jefferson, the running back a couple years ago. Oregon State quietly has been a team that is produced some decent players. And you feel like Oregon State's one of the most forgotten about teams in the Pac-12, and they just they've certainly had their down years, but they've certainly had their bright spots too. You remember back years ago when they upset USC in 2008, they really had no business winning that game, and they came out victorious. That was a crazy game against as good a USC defense you'll ever see, with Clay Matthews, Ray Malaluga. That was something. But yeah, Oregon State, program that's really trending in the right direction. They had that corner too. He was drafted later in the NFL draft. He was a nice player too. So Oregon State trending in the right direction. Washington should be pretty solid too. Michael Penix Jr. Getting buzz as maybe the second best quarterback in this draft. Washington, is this the year where Washington just surprise? I say surprise. They really get it done and win the Pac-12, and you're saying, oh man, maybe Washington, they've found a legitimate coach, and they are maximizing their talent. That's Chris Peterson. It's been a few years now since he's been there, but Washington's still recruited at a high level, and they've produced some NFL guys over the years. Marcus Peters, Levi Onwuzurike. To the Lions, he's had his share of injuries, but he was a guy that was a really good player there. I'm just trying to prove a point of notable guys that Washington's produced. But yeah, Michael Penix, that receiver they have is going to be up there too. So Washington is a very interesting team, very noteworthy team in the Pac-12. That even if they don't win it, like this could be a 9-3 team that no one wants to play, that is competitive and is in there and is right in the mix for the conference title later in the season. So yeah, keep an eye on Washington. I'm not sure what their win total is, but if their win total is if it's 8.5, I'm taking the over on Washington. So let's talk UCLA. Chip Kelly done a really nice job at UCLA. They do lose Zach Charbonnet. They lose Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But UCLA, it seems like Chip Kelly seems to find talent every year, and he seems to know how to utilize his players super well at the college level. At the NFL level, maybe a different story. But yeah, UCLA should be fun this year. Dante Moore, 5-star quarterback. We'll see if he plays this year. We'll see if he gets a start. So that should be interesting. UCLA, it goes to my point. Yeah, the Pac-12 has got several teams that could really, if someone told me UCLA won the Pac-12 this year, I would not be surprised. UCLA, Washington, USC. I mean, you got several teams that have a legit shot of winning the Pac-12. It's too bad what happened to Stanford. Stanford's really fallen off. It's disappointing to watch their offense. Like, it makes me sick to my stomach last year. And I know some people like Tanner McKee. I really like Michael Wilson, that receiver that was drafted by the Cardinals. But, man, Stanford's offense is it's been tough. Urasek, the tight end's a really nice player, too. He's coming back. I thought he was going to declare for this upcoming draft. So at least Stanford has him as a bright spot. But it's too bad that Stanford has really fallen off because Jim Harbaugh leaves. David Shaw does a nice job of keeping the program going, but then they have a little bit of a fall, and then they have a season where it looks like they were gonna kind of come back, and then now it's really fallen off. And what's too bad about Stanford, to me, Stanford's a program that needs to, if it's going, then it's easier to sustain. If it falls completely off, it's hard to build it back up because it's a program like Notre Dame. It's hard to recruit. It's an academic school. It's a school that's still not really on the map. Like if you're even like a 4-star recruit, when you think of the state of California, you don't think Stanford immediately. You think USC, UCLA. Shoot, you might even think Cal, or I don't know. You might think Cal, USC, UCLA. You don't think Stanford. So David Shaw, yeah, it's too bad that Stanford has fallen off. It was a program. Some of those battles with Oregon and Stanford back in the day were super fun. Andrew Luck, it's funny that I thought Andrew Luck, because that was a debate I was thinking about. Like, Caleb Williams is going to get so much hype. He's like Andrew Luck. Like, Andrew Luck probably was like the ultimate can't-miss prospect coming out of Stanford, and Caleb Williams, like, the buzz will be just like that. Like it's crazy to me. But yeah, we'll go back to the Big Ten for a minute. Wisconsin, Luke Fickell enters his first year. Luke Fickell, a guy that's had a lot of success at Cincinnati, got them to the playoff in 2021. I think Wisconsin does have some players. It seems like they develop guys that can play every single season, even if they're not like, superstars. They still tend to find some dudes. No more Graham Mertz at quarterback. So Wisconsin going to have to kind of figure out things at the quarterback position. But, yeah, Wisconsin, they're going to be solid on defense. They're going to want to run the ball. And to me, Wisconsin should be solid once again. I mean, year one under Luke Fickell be really interesting because Wisconsin, to me, was kind of been the same program for a long time. Does Luke Fickell kind of carry that tradition of Wisconsin being like, the physical, run the ball, play solid, stingy defense? Does he kind of keep that going, or do they kind of, they end up running some more shotgun, true spread, 3-4 wide receiver sets? Does Luke Fickell start to transition to that with Wisconsin? I guess that'll be the question I have for Luke Fickell and in his first year at Wisconsin and in the years that follow. But I'll talk Michigan State for a minute. Michigan State, a disappointment this year. I remember watching their first game against Washington this year, and I'm thinking, Michigan State could be a pretty good team. And, if they win that game at Washington this year, what were they ranked? They were top 10, top 15. They win that first game against Washington, and you're thinking, oh, man, Michigan State's, they're on a path back to, being in contention for the Big Ten. But then they lose that game. Really don't really play well, do kind of rebound and getting that road win against Illinois. Actually, I thought they fought fairly hard against Michigan, a little overmatched. I think, the talent gap between Michigan State's gotten a little bit, has spread out a little more. But, yeah, Michigan State this year, no Peyton Thorne, which, could be a good thing. Peyton Thorne was a nice player, but I think he was a guy that really benefited with Kenneth Walker being there because they could use the play action. He had some easier throws. He could kind of get out of the pocket. It was a lot more comfortable. So, yeah, no Peyton Thorne. Berger, the running back, a solid player. They lose Keon Coleman in the transfer portal. So, yeah, I mean, Michigan State, there's a lot of question marks around the program. But, I mean, could they be competitive? You never know. Mel Tucker, maybe he's got some of his sleeve. Maybe they do surprise some people. I know a lot of people were not expecting to do what they did in 2021, but sadly was that, if you're a Michigan State fan, you're worried that was kind of an outlier season, and then Mel Tucker more of is a 500 to above 500 coach, and so that's really the main concern with Michigan State. Talk Michigan again, because why not? So Michigan has a lot of guys returning. J.J. McCarthy could work himself in to be one of the top quarterbacks in next year's draft. A.J. Barner, the tight end, he keeps coming to mind when I think about Michigan. I think he could be a true X factor because Michigan loses Eric All. They lost a transfer. He was hurt last year, and then they lose. What was the other guy? Schoonmaker to the NFL. They do have Colston Loveland back. Colston Loveland, if you're a Michigan fan, you're familiar with Colston Loveland. He was a guy that really emerged late in the season. Big game against Ohio State. He's a guy that can, size, can catch the ball, moves well for a big fella, for a bigger tight end, I should say. So yeah, I mean, you got Loveland, A.J. Barner at tight end. You're solid there. I think Josiah Stewart could quietly be end up being one of the top edge rushers in next year's draft. I don't think he's getting enough talk. He had a tremendous year last year at Coastal Carolina. But yeah, and then Michigan at linebacker, Junior Colson. Junior Colson, consensus have him as a top 10 linebacker. He could work himself into, I think he could be a top 5, top 3 linebacker when it's all said and done for next year's draft. Junior Colson has a really nice skill set. Played a lot of good football for Michigan. Moves very well. Does a good job working through traffic. Good tackler. He's a well-built guy. Just kind of going through, doing a little breakdown on him. And yeah, Will Johnson, I touched on. Will Johnson, he might be the best corner next year in college football, and I don't even say that jokingly. I mean, Will Johnson, his movement skills are legit. I mean, this guy he's for real. Rod Moore at the safety position's a guy I like. Defensive line's a question mark. I love that Chris Jenkins came back. Chris Jenkins, Mozzie Smith were crucial against Ohio State. Chris Jenkins, this guy that's kind of one of the unsung heroes on the Michigan defense. Doesn't really get a lot of love, but he's played a lot of good football for Michigan. And then offensively, Ladarius Henderson was a transfer they got. They lose Oluwatimi, the center, which hurts because Oluwatimi, really nice player. And yeah, running back Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, maybe the two best running backs in the nation. So yeah, Michigan, the pieces are all in place for another 12-0 Big Ten championship run. Am I gonna put my foot down and say they're gonna go 12-0 again? No, I'm not, because that's a really bold. I think that's a pretty bold thing to say they're gonna go 12-0, because it's really not easy to just run the table, go 12-0. Odds are they're gonna slip up somewhere, but like for most teams, one slip up, you still can kind of rebound from it. Like, say Michigan slipped up against, I don't even know, Penn State this year, Maryland, who knows? I don't even want to say that, but then they go into Ohio State game still with a lot to play for. So, yeah, that game could be for all the marbles once again next year. Let's go to ACC. We'll talk Florida State. So Florida State getting a lot of hype. And I'm almost kind of pushing back on the hype, because they have a lot of things to like. First of all, edge rusher. Jared Verse may be the best edge rusher in college football, maybe the first edge rusher off the board next year's draft. But yeah, Mike Norvell. I think this point I'm about to make is spot. I think Mike Norvell still has to prove that he can win big, because at Memphis. I think he won a conference title or two, but they went like 9-4, 10-3. can Mike Norvell, he's proved that he's a good coach. He's a good football coach, but you see a lot of guys that were good football coaches in the Power 5 that were in the non-Power 5 go to the Power 5 and be good, but it doesn't necessarily translate to them winning big, especially even if they have a lot of talent. Hence Charlie Strong, Tom Herman. So can Mike Norvell, like if he does it once, like say next year Florida State goes 14-1, or let's say they go 12-2, make it to win the ACC, losing the first round of college football playoff, which is very bold. But then I think once you've seen Mike Norvell do it once, I think then that you can say he is who he is. He is a guy that can win big because, they're like, I don't know, if he can do it, like if he can do it once, it's likely he'll do it again because it seems like Florida State has just been trending up and up, and if he finally breaks through, you feel like he's going to stay up there. And they've done a really nice job in the transfer portal, getting Keon Coleman, the wide receiver from Michigan State. They did a really good job of getting Jaheim Bell, the tight end from South Carolina. So yeah, they're going to be a fun team. They'll certainly be interesting. LSU Florida State is a must watch week 1 game that kind of gives me nostalgia. Is like, big time week 1 games that I used to be so excited for in college football, like LSU, Oregon 2011, if you remember that, TCU Baylor 2011. Man, there was some good opening week 1 games. I think Baylor TCU was like Friday night, Labor Day weekend, and then LSU Oregon was that Saturday. And I still remember sitting in a hotel room watching Robert Griffin tear it apart, and then I watched LSU with Tyrann Mathieu, Claiborne, all the studs they had in that secondary and that defense, and they beat Oregon that year with Darren Thomas, LaMichael James, Barner, and those guys. That was a fun football game, and it showed just how legit LSU was. LSU didn't win the national championship, but they won the SEC, rematched Bama, and then ended up losing. So yeah, I mean, will we get I think that's the other burning question in college football. Will we see a rematch? Like if Georgia, LSU play in the SEC title, could somehow they both get in if they both meet undefeated, or if one of them has, if they both have one loss or one of them has one loss? That's kind of my early prediction is Michigan, Clemson, Georgia, LSU. That's my early playoff prediction. Yeah, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid in Clemson just because I think, star quarterback or a good quarterback who can compete, upside, Cade Klubnik, check. Dabo Swinney, a coach that's been there, check. Defensive difference makers, Nate Wiggins, Barrett Carter, check. Peter Woods, a difference maker at defensive line, check. Clemson has all the ingredients you want to win a national title. If you really went down the line of all the teams that have won the national title, they usually have checked all the boxes that Clemson is checking this year. So that's why I'm really buying into the Clemson Tigers, and we'll certainly see. But I'm gonna wrap with that. Thanks for tuning in to Big Time Football Talk. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.